Well, I'm Shari Wilson. I have worked for an environmental education NGO for a number of years and recently started my own little company to work with schools and education organizations on environmental projects, greening the school, nature trails, and writing curriculum that deal with environmental education and science and math. Here in Germany, I've been doing some talks for the U.S. Embassy about going green, and more specifically about projects in cities and schools where citizens have taken the lead in incorporating projects that are related mostly to climate change, but in some other areas as well. And I'm also very interested in the Embassy's Going Green program that is new and will be in schools soon. Environmental education is a learning process. The goal is to increase awareness of the environment, then increase appreciation about the environment. We also want to encourage students and people in general to learn more about environmental issues and to develop the skills that are needed to make good decisions about the environment and to also take responsible actions. Environmental education is non-biased, and by that we mean that many people need to use the Earth's resources. Also, we have plants and animals that we must share the Earth's resources with. We have business and industry and agriculture, as well as nature lovers. And so we all have to figure out how to use what resources we have for all of these purposes. And so all of these groups need to be involved in environmental education. And so we encourage students to develop critical thinking skills, asking a lot of questions about information that they may receive about the environment, being a little bit skeptical about some of the answers they get, and trying to dig deeper and develop problem-solving skills as well, so that when they're in a position to make good decisions and take actions, they have good information and they know how to relate that information to their own personal beliefs in a way that they can take on a project and make a difference. Yes, there are a number of cities in the United States that have been taking on green projects in the last few years, primarily related to climate change. One of these cities is Denver, Colorado, which has had a light rail line for almost 20 years, but continues to expand its light rail stations and number of miles of light rail. They have a very interesting approach because they are working with private business to help fund the transportation enhancements and also to turn the city into a transit-oriented city where next to the light rail station or the bus station is not just a parking lot, but are businesses and services. So when you get on the bus or you get on the light rail, you can drop your child at the daycare center, maybe drop your clothes at the dry cleaners. When you come home, you can pick your child up from the daycare, stop at the grocery store, maybe go to the library, then get in your car and go home. And so that encourages people to leave the car parked longer. They're not taking the bus or the light rail back and forth to work and then getting in the car and going and doing all their errands. So businesses like it, the city likes it, it seems to be working well for everyone. Another project is in Kansas City, Missouri, where they're starting a streetcar line. This is a new endeavor for the city. It's been a little bit controversial, so we'll see how well it works there. Another project has been done in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where they are working on stormwater issues. Stormwater is water that, when it rains, runs off the roof of your house or runs off a parking lot or a street. And so it has pollutants in it. It generally runs into a sewer and then gets treated and deposited back into a river. Our storm sewers are very old and they get overloaded very easily. So Philadelphia is looking at green ways to treat more of the rain where it falls by adding more plants along the streets and sidewalks and parking lots, and by working with schools to make their playground areas and parking areas into gardens so that they can also absorb more of the runoff from nearby streets. And the plants will help treat the runoff, make it cleaner water, so it doesn't just immediately go into a storm sewer. And so these are a few projects that are happening with cities, and they're partnering with schools. There are a number of examples of what students can do to help make their school or their community a greener place. Many schools in the United States have recycling programs that are student-led. The students collect paper or plastic, sometimes even food from the cafeteria that's not eaten, and they collect it and deposit it in a special bin, which then usually a company comes and picks up once or twice a week or whenever it's necessary. And the food waste is usually composted and used in a garden on the school grounds or just for the landscaping around trees or flower gardens. And it's been interesting that the students have been able to keep much of the waste out of the garbage, which also saves the school money because they don't have to have the trash company come and empty the garbage bin as much. So school administrators like the program because it saves money as well as helps the environment. Students have also done energy audits at their schools where they're looking for ways to conserve energy, which helps the environment because there are fewer CO2 emissions coming if you're using less electricity. Administrators also like the program because, again, it saves money. So they can hire more teachers or buy more materials for the school or whatever they need. The students generally start by collecting data about how much energy is being used by various parts of the school building. They also look at things like weatherization, which is the building leaking air? Are the windows tight? Are the doors tight? Are there cracks in the foundation that let air in? Things like that. They measure how much energy different devices are using, like computers, refrigerators, copy machines, even water fountains. And they analyze the data. They look at the utility bills at the school and learn how to read those bills, which are sometimes a little bit complicated. They also interview the people working at the school, the teachers, the people working in the office, the people working in the cafeteria, to find out what their habits are. Do they turn off their machines when they go home at night, or do they just leave them all running? And so the students then gather all this data, they make a report with some recommendations, and then present it to their teacher or their school administrator, and ask for the recommendations to be implemented. And these are also things that students can do at home with their own family. The Obama Climate Action Plan is an effort by President Obama to make an impact with regard to climate change. Um, the U.S. Congress is very divided on the issue of climate change, and therefore any legislative action is not likely to happen. However, he does care about this issue and wants to make an effort to do what he can administratively through his cabinet offices to reduce climate change in the United States, um, and also to help our cities in the United States begin to prepare for the impacts of climate change, such as some of the very severe flooding we've had and the big storms that we've had in the last few years. Our cities are not prepared for the flooding and the infrastructure damage that these storms are causing. So in future planning, the federal government will increase its requirements for bridge and highway design, for example, to make the bridges stronger and the roads stronger. Also with regard to flood insurance rates and the areas where flood insurance might be required, they are developing new maps so that you will know if you're in a potential flood zone or not. And another thing that the administration is doing is developing regulations with regard to CO2 emissions from existing power plants. This is a very important development. It's very controversial, but power plants in the United States are responsible for about 40% of emissions. So if we can reduce emissions there, that will make a big difference. And the EPA should have these regulations ready by summer of 2014. And after that, I'm sure they will go to court because they will be controversial, and it may be a while before they're actually implemented. So the president's trying to use his agencies to combat climate change and prepare the country in a better way through education and other means for the coming impacts of climate change.